All right, well, welcome everybody to day one of the 2021 Planetary Health Annual Meeting, which is co-hosted by the University of Sao Paulo and the Planetary Health Alliance. I'm Sam Myers, Director of the Planetary Health Alliance based in Boston. I'm very pleased to be introducing this panel entitled The Change We Need Must Be Based on Shared Values. I think a perfect follow-on to that very inspiring keynote we just heard from Dr. Kimmerer. I have the privilege of introducing Mary Evelyn Tucker. Mary Evelyn is the co-director of the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, where she teaches in the master's program between the School of the Environment and the Divinity School. With John Grimm, she organized 10 conferences on world religions and ecology here at Harvard, which helped really launch a new field. They were series editors for the 10 resulting volumes from Harvard, and she co-edited Confucianism and Ecology, Buddhism and Ecology, and Hinduism and Ecologies. She's authored several other really interesting and important books in the field, as well as editing several others. She served on the International Earth Charter Drafting Committee and was a member of the Earth Charter International Council. She's truly a giant in the field of scholarship, exploring ecological thinking across the world's great religions, and the perfect person, I think, to be moderating this extraordinarily special panel. Welcome, Mary Evelyn.
Sam, thank you so much for your leadership and all your team and the team in Sao Paulo as well. It's an amazing conference and I'm thrilled to be part of it. And we heard such a terrific talk, didn't we, from Robin Kimmerer, something that we really need to process and meditate with, as Sam said. But just to begin us in following through from what Robin was saying, we know that all the world's religions and cultures have something very special to offer. And that includes clearly indigenous traditions. And one of the conferences at Harvard had people from every continent. And that volume represents what we are now understanding, how important TEAK is, traditional environmental knowledge. But all of the world's religions have something to offer in this moment of change. And that's what this panel will also discuss. And I'm just going to begin, if I might, with very brief introductions to our panelists, and then just a brief reflection also on what Robin has just offered to us. So we have Karenna Gore, who's a founder and director of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Seminary in New York. And that center bridges the worlds of religion, academia, policy, and culture to discern and pursue the changes that are necessary to stop ecological destruction and create a society that values the long-term health of the whole. She has many other things that she has done, and you can see it in the bios, but I'm thrilled to be working with Karenna for a number of years now with her center, our center, and many, many people who are in this movement. It's a very, very exciting time. So welcome, Karenna. And then we also have a very distinguished person from Africa, Lucy Mulenkei, who's the executive director of the Indigenous Information Network, and her bio is also extraordinarily rich and long. But she's part of the Maasai tribe, and her expertise lies in the sustainable development of Kenya's indigenous pastoral communities. And for 17 years, she served as a broadcast journalist for a government-run radio station, and her reporting focused on environmental issues within rural Kenya and the East African region. She's coordinated sustainable development trainings and capacity building for indigenous rural nomadic pastoralists and hunter-gatherers that utilizes traditional knowledge and incites conversations on biodiversity. We look forward to hearing more from her. And we're delighted as well to have Nainoa Thompson from Hawaii, very early in the morning there. And he's about to launch into yet another oceanic voyage. He is an explorer, environmentalist. He's the president of the Polynesian Voyaging Society. He's a cultural revivalist, an educator, and a storyteller. And he's led the rediscovery and revival of the ancient Polynesian art of navigation. Extraordinary. We heard him speak in 1990 in Hawaii at a World History Conference, and it changed our lives. Through his voyaging, teaching, and engagement, he has opened a global, multi-generational dialogue on the importance of sustaining ocean resources and maritime heritage. Nainoa has dedicated his life to exploring the ocean, maintaining the health of the planet, and ensuring that the ancient marine heritage and culture of Polynesia remain vibrant into the future. What a gift to have these extraordinary people. Unfortunately, one of our panelists could not join us due to other circumstances, Jerá, Guarani, and we look forward to another time hearing from her. But if we could begin with just some reflections, I think from Karenna and Lucy, and then we'll move on to other questions and begin with Nainoa. But Karenna, maybe you could just give some thoughts from Robin Kimmerer's talk, which was so moving. Thanks, Karenna.
Thank you very much, Mary Evelyn. I'm delighted to be here. I want to also thank the Planetary Health Alliance and the University of Sao Paulo. I want to thank Mary Evelyn Tucker, who's been a great mentor and teacher and colleague to me over the years. And to my fellow panelists, I have such respect for your work. Really honored to be in this conversation with you. So to reflect on Robin Wall Kimmerer's talk, I thought it was beautiful and powerful, and her writing is as well. And I want to pull out a few points that she made that we might be able to build on and weave into the work that I know my fellow panelists have been doing. And one of those things is about the objectification of the natural world and how this has happened in such a widespread way, and how children are actually educated to do that, even though innately they feel the kinship and the to use the term interbeing with other species. I think it's such an important point. And I believe that it underscores something very important for this whole conversation, which is there is a secular value system or belief system that is very much foisted on many of us around the world. And of course, a lot of people experience this through colonization, which we must acknowledge. It is also experienced for children who are coming into the world and then have this objectification belief system put on them. And I think that one of the things that religions have to offer, all of the world's faith traditions, is a counterforce to that, because you can see in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, in Hinduism and other Indic traditions, in Buddhism and other East Asian traditions, there are these teachings that show the sanctity of the natural world, the interconnectedness of life. Even in the Abrahamic traditions that are based on, well, taking the Hebrew Bible, you can look at that Hebrew Bible and see that there is so much personification and agency from nature, God speaking through nature, God speaking with nature. And so I believe that us understanding that the role of religion, faith, and spirituality is really crucial in this time to be a counterforce to what Dr. Kimmerer described as the objectification of the natural world. And if I may say one other thing, I was really struck by her notion that she put forward this teaching of the seventh fire, of how we understand this time today. And there again, I see some really interesting corollaries to some of the teachings in other religions. And in particular, I would say that there is this notion of the apocalypse in the tradition that, of course, in Christianity. And I know that there are many scholars that are currently really working to explain to people that apocalypse is, the meaning is an unveiling and a revealing. And we have that famous, well-known quote from the Bible in Romans 8:22 about all creation groans, waiting for the children of God to be revealed. And I really thought of that as she talked about the seventh fire this time. And I thought about the fact that usually when we're dealing with some of our religious traditions, we deal with different versions. We deal with a distorted version, which is sometimes part of that that objectification of the natural world, and then we deal with a beautiful, deep spiritual version. And I think that those of us working with these other world religions and traditions within faith communities have such important work to do, to dig deep and to bring out the powerful teachings in other world traditions, to really amplify and bolster this beautiful vision that Robin Wall Kimmerer has articulated, that really comes from Indigenous peoples. And we acknowledge that and really respect that. And we also need to do work in our own cultures and traditions to bring out those other teachings there. So thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Karenna. And let's go over to Lucy as well, shall we? And I just want to say before we do that, because we are missing Jerá Guarani, and I just wanted to say that she is a Brazilian indigenous leader of the Tenonde Pora village, a traditional, where she's working on traditional seed agriculture, and she has a degree in pedagogy from the University of Sao Paulo, and we're very much missing her due to a family conflict and so on. But we are thrilled to have Lucy from the continent of Africa and from Kenya, and to have her wisdom and all these years of working with pastoralists and herders and so on. So Lucy, over to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and also want to thank the panelists and all those who organized this wonderful conference. I think at the beginning, when the invitation came some months ago, I thought, well, April was very far away, but here we are, and things are happening, and it's really very important that we are here discussing this. I just happened to have gotten into the meeting when Robin, I didn't hear all that, but I think the first part of her presentation, but what I heard from her already immediately, I kind of simplified myself and took myself down to the village, how we grew up. And what she was speaking is reality, being an Indigenous woman. She brought up quite very important issues, especially on the storytelling, which I think it's something that disappeared a long time ago. And it's something that we all need to look at. And I think I like the way Karenna had explained very well and looked at the spirituality and the prayers and different religions that we have. I come from Africa, where we still have I work with communities who are still in their traditional way of life, even in prayers, even though Christianity and some other religions came in, but they still have that belief in their own traditional way. And also the way we were told stories, these particular stories that she was referring to, some of the stories when she was explaining, I thought there were those stories which were really kind of like precautions on how we should look at Mother Earth, how we should respect, how we should handle issues, if it is the animals or if it is the plants, even how to eat and how to production and consumption. The stories that were told and the sayings that were given to us really taught us how to be able to save and look at Mother Earth in a different way. And when you look at today's world, where the digital world is, and the children who are growing up now, it's very difficult for them sometimes to believe some of the things that were happening before. And I thought, well, she's actually taking us back to the roots, and that's why we are talking about having shared values, that we have to share these values and we have to share these examples. We have to share these stories. We have to bring back our languages, which have meant, because everything in that community was, connected. Every time we wake up in the morning, for us, for example, the pastoralist, an elder would wake up in the morning, depending on what communities are right there in that particular kraal, or a place where the communities is at the moment. If at all it is two different communities speaking two different languages, he will pray, and the women are milking. There was a system, and that system was really a very important system because it protected and looked at our values differently, and we learned from it. So I think this is very important where we are sharing this particular, and I think the conference is a unique one because we are really trying to see some of the things that are very, very crucial, considering of what we are facing in the world today: destruction, everything, deforestation. So I think these are very important things that we learned from Robin. And since this was recorded, I think it's something that we would need to share so that we can all listen back and reflect in our way of life. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we honor East Africa and Kenya for a Nobel Prize winner Wangari Maathai and her work with the Greenbelt movement. So maybe we'll come back to that and her sense of bringing together her own Christian training and her own indigenous roots along the lines of this fusion that Robin is inviting us into. And what an extraordinary person and a great friend, I must say, of this movement of religion and ecology. So Lucy, we're thrilled that you're here and you link us back to our ancestors, which include Wangari.
Yes. She was my mentor. I worked with her for a long, long time. Yeah. And I really still see her right there in front of me every time.
An inspiration. She's on my desk, her picture. Nainoa Thompson. So wonderful to have you here. And you have had decades of work along the lines of cultural revival, of Polynesian oceanic techniques of navigation, which were held together by a thread by Mao and your own group, relearning the skies, the water, dark nights, reading the way forward. And I just am delighted you're with us, and I turn it over to you to talk, as you do so well, about the cultural values that inspired you and that you share with your fellow travelers.
Okay, well, hello, Mike. Thank you so much, Mary, for the introduction. And I'm just really honored to be here for it's really nice to meet Karenna and Lucy and see other parts of the world. And already I can tell that we're way more alike than we're different. And so those connections halfway across the planet is what, planetary health does. Mm-hmm. It connects us. So it's, I do want to share that it's honored to be here. We're in the middle of the Pacific, born and raised in Hawaii, an ocean that's bigger than all the terrestrial land on the planet. It's massive. And we're trying to do our part for a better future. And sometimes we need to lean on the strength and the beauty of others. And I just want to say that before I get started, I just want to say thank you to Sam Myers for having a chance to meet him and to listen to him and about his vision, where it really is, it gives me hope because he has a global equation. It's like a code that he's trying to crack that secures the future where humanity is healthy and safe. And it's that inclusion, the diversity of values, it's global. And the thing that I've been very touched about what he does is that, we can't protect the earth if we don't understand it. We won't if we don't care. And so education and values is crucial. They are part of that code, and we can't do it by ourselves. And so what Planetary Health Alliance does, it builds this global network. So to speak about the power of values to unite us, you got to get Sam and others on this Zoom call, and I've been very inspired by it. I'm a student of their work, and the thing that I'm becoming clearer that we are changing the earth. It's changing us in a lot of ways. We don't know what to do because we're actually altering systems on the earth, natural systems, cultural systems, economic systems, and the solutions have to be systems based. And that's what Planetary Health Alliance does for me. Inspiring. I just wanted to share that before I even get started. I'm just a student. I'm born and raised on an island, and much of the values that we are taught really came from family. What's the most important teacher is my mother, who is one of the world's great naturalists, who respected all living things. We were born and raised that, where no door was closed in our house because pets can come in, wildlife can come in the house, and they're respected. And the other is, before I even get started, I'd just like to bring in my teacher into this room. His name is Pius Piedug. His nickname is Mao, to be fierce. He's from Micronesia, and he would be the last. That thread that you talk about, that edge of extinction, the cliff, we're standing on it. And he was the last master on the planet. And so who would take the voyaging canoe hokule and sail it 2,500 miles to a small island called Tahiti and restore dignity and respect to the tradition, but open up the door about how extraordinary. And he and my mother are the great naturalists. You only know where you are by memorizing you come from. He showed us how to pay attention to nature, and so we're deeply embedded to him. So anyway, that's just an introduction to who I am, a student of many powerful teachers, and thank you.
Well, thank you. And we'll have another round, of course, and draw you out even more. But Karenna, if we might just, in this next round, let's, you started beautifully on some of the world's religions and what they can offer, and love to draw you out a little bit more. I know you've done terrific work with Indigenous peoples as well. Our mutual concern, as my husband is a scholar of Indigenous traditions, but I'd love to hear you a bit more. You're at a seminary in New York, Union Seminary. So on the values of the various world religions, if you could share some of them along the lines toward not just sustainability, but flourishing, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question, Mary Evelyn. And to bridge to answering that, I want to say that really appreciate what Lucy and Nainoa just said, and to pick up on Nainoa's sense of listening. And of course, Robin Wall-Kimmerer mentioned that as well. We have within the major world religions so much diversity within each of those religions. And in all of them, there is a mystical strain. And this particularly is pronounced in Sufi for Islam. And of course, there are different expressions within Judaism and Christianity. And of course, we have in Hinduism and Buddhism, a great mystical strain. And so I think that's where you find where some things come together on that specific point about listening. And it's a beautiful thing. I also want to, and related to that is the teaching of interconnectedness and interrelatedness. That is particularly pronounced, I would say, in a Buddhist worldview. But it is something that there has been a great deal of work drawing from within other world traditions to make this point. Pope Francis has done this work. Particularly, I'd lift up Laudato Si', the encyclical teaching that he wrote on care for our common home in 2015, in which he talks about integral ecology and interrelatedness and interconnection with the natural world in a way that is very powerful. And he also addresses the fact that there has been this distortion. There has been this, what we might say, toxic theology that is actually the opposite, that has looked at dominion as domination over the world, and Imago Dei as being only human beings are in the image of God, like that that graph that Robin Wall-Kimmerer showed us. That is the distorted interpretation of this idea of Imago Dei and dominion. And so I want to acknowledge that Pope Francis and other leaders within the Christian world have a little extra work to do on untangling that knot and detoxifying that part of the interpretation. But there is the interrelatedness, the interconnection, and the wholeness, which is held in those other traditions, as well as I said, as in Buddhism, where you have the great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh says, we are here to awaken to the illusion of our separateness. And that is certainly resonant in many other places. I would also lift up, well, again, from Buddhism in particular, karma. And I have to acknowledge Mary Evelyn Tucker is an expert on East Asian traditions, and I am not. So you can correct me anytime. But the idea of cause and effect, of understanding that they're on a divine level, that there is, just because we don't measure something and we don't count it and we don't pay attention to it, does not mean it doesn't exist. And that's been true about the fossil fuel pollution. And you can see in the sort of false solutions, you know, Robin Wall-Kimmerer talked about these new technologies. There's even a research now going to geoengineering, solar radiation geoengineering, to try to see if we can inject aerosols into the sky to reflect sunlight back. That is an example of violating karma, because you're not looking at the level of cause, you're just operating at the level of effect. And you're going to make the same mistake over and over and over, unless you know the spiritual truth, the divine law. And that, I would say, is voiced in some ways in particularly Abrahamic traditions as justice. That there is, and Jesus taught, what you do to the least of those you do to me. That is also true for environmental justice. We now have a world in which the health of the whole is threatened, in part because certain peoples have been dehumanized. And so just as there's a distortion that says only human beings are important, whole groups of people, rich, beautiful cultures, and this is particularly true for indigenous peoples, peoples of color, peoples of African descent, have been dehumanized. And so when you look at the teachings of justice and the teachings of karma, you can see that in the divine realm, there will be an answer to this. There will be consequences to this. And so what we can do, drawing from these teachings, and I would also mention that there are techniques. There are these teachings that are very important, and then there are techniques for movement building. So from that, we see from Indic traditions, Hinduism, from the teachings of Gandhi in particular, we see ahimsa, nonviolence, and satyagraha, truth force. It's had a real impact on nations and global movements towards liberation of peoples to take that faith principle. In terms of dealing with this production and consumption loop, this idea that having more stuff makes you more worthy. This is confusing wealth with virtue. This is a major problem. And there are many people in what the so-called first world, the so-called developed nations, who are led actually astray by this notion of happiness. And so we look, how do we undo that? And there are teachings from within different traditions. And I would just say one from Christianity is kenosis, this idea of self-emptying. It's a theological term. It's not a fancy concept. In fact, it's probably taught so strongly in indigenous cultures around the world, this idea of emptying the self and the ego, because there are so many places where the community is lifted up, the health of the whole is lifted up, more than this individualistic, materialistic, competitive paradigm that we've allowed to develop in the dominant culture. And so I want to say that I believe that we have this wonderful opportunity together to look at what all of these religions and faith traditions offer. There's so much else to say. I don't want to go on too long, but I will just end by saying when Robin Wall Kimmerer cites Oren Lyons, who she says is her great teacher, and he is indeed a wonderful elder of the Onondaga Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy from this region that I am in right now. I'm in upstate New York, and I would also acknowledge the Lenape people, who were the original caretakers, inhabitants of the land that I'm on now. But what she cites Oren Lyons to say is value change for survival. 4 words: value change for survival. We're now faced with catastrophe. We're, as Nainoa said, right at the edge of that cliff. We must change at the level of cause, not just effect. We must look at the values. We must change our relationship to the earth, and we must also change those other measurements that are leading people astray, and understand that that it is not about individualism, competitive, acquiring material wealth in a short-term way. We have to think in terms of long-term health of the whole and the ideas of justice and love and karma and grace. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just marvelous, and so glad it's recorded. And I just want to say, maybe if I could pick up 2 points, that a lot of these resources are on the website called the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. I'll put that in there. And for almost 30 years, many scholars and activists, environmental justice people have been working to build this field of resources from the world's religions. But I also want to say, as Karenna did at the beginning, we recognize there's problems and there's promise with all these traditions. But right now, this drawing on well springs for the health of the planet and all its peoples is, I think we're at a transformative moment. This is a great transition. And there was one question in here about the Laudato Si and what the Pope is saying. And of course, coming from Latin America, we want to give a big shout out to the spiritual sensibilities for the land there. And his he is pulling together environmental concern with justice concern for eco-justice. And the key term there is care of the earth, care of the poor. So maybe we can return to that in the next round, Karenna or anybody else. But Lucy, so much to draw on from you and your perspective once again. Maybe you could give us even more specifically some of the values that you've seen over these decades of your studies with Maasai people and others, pastoralists and so on, of ways we can re-inhabit the earth in appropriate and balanced ways. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Karenna, for that wonderful presentation, really very important, and brings us, even it's a discussion on all religions, but it brings us back to the ground. And I know, I think I like the way you started it off, because I really love Hawaii. I was in Hawaii in 2016, and I thought I was in Africa, in one of the islands in Africa. And what really the world does is that for indigenous people, we are all in different continents, but actually we are the same people. We have these values, we have these things that we work together, and we really connect despite the languages, despite the colors, and despite the different geographical areas where we are. I work with, in my organization, I work with a lot with the indigenous women, girls, and even elders, and also youth. And at the same time, we do a lot of networking with our colleagues from different parts of Africa. We kind of know each other because we all learn from each other, and we also share a lot of issues together. We also work with quite a number of colleagues from Latin America, because we all have this unity together. We have the Indigenous Women and Biodiversity Network. We have the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, not only from Latin America, from Asia, and from the Americas, like colleagues in the Pacific, in Hawaii, and so on. And what we have learned for many years is that we have been able to bring our thoughts together. We have seen the world being distracted. We have tried to look at it and seen that the values are really totally gone. We've tried our best to follow the traditional ways of trying to look at how we can bring back Mother Earth, and how we can really be able to value what we have and what God gave us. Because in all the world, indigenous people know that that land was given for us to be there and to be able to continue and protecting it and conserving it and giving it for the next generations to come. But all these distractions that we've had, and different things that have come on pollution, on everything, we have learned that we have to work with our communities to make sure that at least what we believe from the word go can continue, can be something that we can continue protecting Mother Earth. And we always have to cry and shout and see how these things are being done. And I really was happy to hear environmental justice being brought here as a discussion. The values we have, we all value them, because the indigenous women do work together, do share the seeds, do share the different aspects of issues that have already disappeared, like the traditional medicines, the traditional foods. And we are seeing a really big shift in terms of the thinking. Some years back, before maybe 1 year in 2019 was different from 2020 when we had the the COVID-19, when it came, it brought us a different thinking. And it started showing that the world needs to rethink. We have to rethink on seeing how our value us and how we value our environment, how we look at our lands. What is in the natural resources we have in our lands. Remember that indigenous people's land carry almost 80% of the natural resources. All the resources are there. But at the same time, these indigenous people, hunter-gatherers, and other minorities, they don't benefit a lot from it because of the different perspectives that have caused them to really suffer for many years. But the time when we were all brought back together, starting to work together, things are changing slowly by slowly to make sure the world can understand and see this particular value and why indigenous people have continued to really value and look at the different natural resources that we have been able to do. And one important thing about in Africa, especially for indigenous women, we know that we carry they carry the biggest workload. They are the ones who feed the family. They're the ones who know where they're sick and they know everything. Like for a pastoral woman, she's the one who builds the house. She does everything, all the workload together. And as you mentioned earlier on, that is why even for many years, we have to really see how we can work with that particular woman to be able to reduce our workload and to see whether those values that were there before can continue being where they're supposed to be. And you mentioned earlier on about Wangari Maathai, Professor Wangari Maathai. We still believe she's there with us and she's working always together with us. And when she mentioned about these little things that we sometimes ignore and think that they don't value, have come to bring values that are really very important. All the different sayings she was giving us, they are things that we have come to prove and seen and practice them and see that we really need to look and take every single step that we take. And we have to collectively work together. The issue of rights is one of the key issues that because indigenous women are never recognized, indigenous people's rights are never recognized, it's very difficult for people to kind of think, you know, do these people know anything? But those particular rights are very important because they are the ones that really help them to be who they are. And they are the identity of their own people because they know their rights are very important. When we work with indigenous people, we have different ways. We are not only looking at different of rights, we're also looking at environment. And remember, from Rio up to the time where we are still continuing to demand to be recognized. We look at different development activities with the value that this land belongs to us, these resources belong to us. And we must try to make sure that these values we have, the beliefs we have in terms of looking at those resources still remain with us and we leave them for the children to come. And we know that there are many challenges that have come in. And those challenges, we have to integrate them and make sure that we can see how to look at them in a development paradigms that have come at in these particular years that we are in. So it's very important to look at these particular issues together. And when always we say we share values, it's very interesting that for us in Africa, among us in Africa, among the different indigenous peoples, tribes, and so on, we share together because we live in a different ecosystem and we can share from different parts of the region and share what we have and what we don't have. So it's really very important to look at these values and we, even though we are in Africa, we still believe that what others have in the other areas can also be able to really make us stronger than the way we were before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That's so powerful. And we'll have a final word from Nainoa, and then we're going to go to questions, and we'll probably all make our responses short because there's lots of good questions. But Nainoa, you have whatever time you need, but there's one question that might relate to what you want to say, if I could just put it out there. And that is, it picks up, I think, from what Lucy said and Karenna too, about the integral ecologies and the role of cosmologies that integrate spirituality, livelihoods, social relationships with the natural world. So in all of this, we're realizing the values come from deep cosmologies, right, to ecological and social values. But Nainoa, your work is so special, and please pick up whatever you'd like to speak about right now.
Thank you, Mary. I'm just really grateful, and I'm learning so much from two strangers, Karenna and Lucy, and strengthening the belief that you know, one of the questions I have: what is the culture of humanity? What are those core values that will define humanity? Because does the culture still care enough to change? Is it aware enough? Is it educated enough to make good decisions? And so we in these tiny little islands that we live in the middle of the Pacific are trying to figure that out. How do we contribute to that? And so listening to Karenna and Lucy, you find that we're so much more alike. And I'm very grateful to that. When we sailed around the world, that's what we were trying to figure out. You know, is our global community still care enough? The simple value of caring. enough to change where our individual lives, we see a world that's bigger than us and the responsibility to be able to make the right choices. Imagine that you're on a voyaging canoe. When we were relearning voyaging from the great master navigator, we didn't know anything. I mean, we didn't know how to stand. We didn't know how to sleep. We didn't know how to look. And so all we did was watch him because he could barely speak English. The last master navigator in 4,000 years, he was our teacher. And imagine a day at sea, an average day at sea. You may be out there 30 days. And you only know where you are by memorizing where you come from. And what you're memorizing is what nature is gifting you. Clues, issues of whether it's the cosmos, whether it's the atmosphere, whether it's the ocean wave, whether it's the seabird, whether it's life in the oceans. This man, if you only know where you are by memorizing you come from, and you can't memorize if you're sleeping. He's up 22 hours a day, sleeps in 20-minute cat naps when he can't think, gets up, and he's focusing on nature. Nature is showing him the way. He doesn't believe you go to an island. He believes the island comes to you if you are paying attention to nature. And I think about a day in the life of Mao Piailug, the great master, and he'll make 5,000 observations of nature in a day. He'll make 500 choices about turn left, turn right, trim this, balance the canoe, move weight, and in the 22 hours that he's awake. And then he'll make two decisions, the one's at sunrise and one's at sunset, constantly updating, where am I? And where do I need to go? So you only know where you are by memorizing you come from, but you only know where you are. You only know where you need to go because you know where you are. And so being with him, I just asked the question, what if we have 8 billion people on a small island called Earth? And what if each person on Earth were to make 500 choices? That's 4 trillion human choices per day. What if they were good ones? And so, the work of Lucy and Karenna are helping us to move us forward about those kinds of decisions and choices that we have to make. And for us, it's really quite simple. The ocean is a rough place. The ocean's unforgiving if you're not prepared. The 2 things that we train for at the highest level of priority is safety, and the other is values. It's values, because on the voyaging canoe, if you do not come together, you will not find the island you seek. And the issue about values is so crucial but it's simple. The way we were trained, it's you come and learn, you come and you work and you come and share, irregardless of any kinds of boundaries of racism or indifference. None of that matters. Even though Hokulea, our voyaging canoe, is very Hawaiian, it's carrying the values of living on an island. Island living, and for thousands of years, imagine that the ancestry in Hawaii is 2,000. Imagine the island in Micronesia and Malcolm is 4,000 on these tiny little islands, and it survived because the belief that you have responsibility and you have much larger than yourself. I mean, my teacher will talk about the graduation of the great masters. It's called Po. And he'll talk about when your teacher lets you go to sea by yourself. And he'll talk about the graduation is that it's like college. You graduate and you can go deep sea by yourself, but you really don't know anything yet. You need to go onto the ocean. And he'll talk about it always in the end. He'll say, Po, the master navigator, is the light. Light is love. And he'll say, if there's conflict, you resolve. If there's a wounded seabird, you take care. So in the end, our cultures, our values are really quite simple. It's kindness. It's respect. It's kindness to all living things. It's respect. If you cannot establish that on the deck of the canoe, you cannot hold that crew together. And so, I had the privilege to sail 46 years. I'm really an old guy. I've never seen an argument on the canoe. And yet, when I think about what is the greatest canoe ever constructed on the, to me, it's the earth. If you start to pull it apart and understand how extraordinary we can sit in a room and breathe air without a spacesuit, that we can go 1,000 miles an hour and go more than a million miles across space around the revolution of an amazing thing called the sun. All those things that allow us to live the lives that we have. But today, with the 8 billion, the responsibility is, are we going to care? Are we going to take care of it? And the thing about kindness is from our teachers that say, when the storm comes, you stand up, Nainoa, you put on your jacket, you face the wind, and don't let anybody know you're afraid. Instead of fear, you must treat every single storm that comes to you with kindness. It's taking care of each other. And so we know that the values we learn from an island, the values we learn from the oceans, really goes back to some we make a bet to our families and our children, we're going to come home, that the voyage that we do of education is worth it. So it's really simple to us that it's love of home. When I hear Lucy talk, I can sense that her value is the protection of her place. This is my place. It's my ancestors. It's my responsibility, and the child and family and communities. It comes from being on different kinds of voyaging canoes, whether it's an island or it's our voyaging or Hokulea or the earth. But that's where I think we are. We are on this island that is the only one that we can inhabit. It's the only one. With all the power of our optical astronomy, we cannot find anything close to what we have today. And it ends up in the end, respect and kindness.
Thank you so much, Nainoa. I can't resist just interjecting, since you gave such a wonderful shout out to Sam and the planetary health movement and what he's doing there in Sao Paulo as well. And those of us in the heart of the beast, which is academia, which is still very closed to these issues because science and engineering reign. But I have to just tell you, Nainoa, in December, several hundred faculty, almost 400, gathered to think about planetary solutions. And at the end of this online conference, I mentioned your work and traditional environmental knowledge from around the world, but particularly the navigational techniques. And I got responses from the Dean of Engineering, the Dean of Architecture, from several scientists, and students, by the way, are all over this. So I think there's a moment when Lucy's work of Indigenous knowledge, I know this work, and Jenna, who would be with us, and certainly what Karenna is sharing, is finally breaking down. And I just want to say that's why this is so important that a conference like this is opening with values, not technology or even finance and so on, all of which are important. But let's return to a question of Sam in the same spirit, where he's saying he hears the common thread of the different world's religions sharing the value of nature, even its sacrality. And by the way, that's a word we can't use in academia. So I appreciate that Karenna did and others do. But he's saying, if that's the case, then how have we lost that sense of reverence that we feel towards nature? How is it losing its authority in guiding our decisions? Such an important question. Maybe we could just have a brief round there because we're getting short on time, but it's such a good question. Who would like to begin? Let me just open it up. Maybe Lucy, we'll just call on you, change the order a little bit.
I thought Karenna would speak because I think she had almost brought up that. And I think the thread has been broken and the chain has been broken because of what Karenna, I think it was Karenna earlier on, or was it Nainoa who talked about more people think more of wealth than the values. And this is where, to me, I find that is where the disconnection is. And that is the difference between our world as Indigenous people, where we continue the thread. you know, like you're in a community, like what Nainoa was talking about, being in a boat and you are, you know, you are there and the winds come. That thread, that chain cannot be broken. We have to keep on going on. And that's why in different parts of the world, indigenous people still have that thread, they still have that chain. And all the time they have to look and see where it's loose and you connect it. But the world we are living in with the current scientific and the wealth that we have, theirs is to break that thread. They look at the value of money, they're different, completely different thinking. Their values are totally different. So this is the way it is. And when we talk about the change we need, this is actually the change we need to make sure that we must base it on shared values. That's why indigenous people have to share. Indigenous women have to share their seeds. They have to change other people's lives. We are from the dry lands, not even the water. Some of us fear water when we go to the ocean. But wherever we are is where we try to make sure we make a difference within ourselves. The indigenous women who are in Dakota, who are in different parts of the world, we still have the chain together and help each other. Those shared values that we have, our traditions that we have, our cultures, our languages, and our songs, stories, and everything that we have, because this is what connects us. So I think I'll start it there and then give it to Karenna, because I really wanted her also to speak about this because she started it and it was quite interesting. And I think Nainoa must be also very keen on knowing what happens down in Hawaii. When I went there, I told them, but why are you in the US? You are supposed to be a continent of your own, because the things I saw were really different. We visited different farms, we visited schools where they are taught languages and they are different, completely set up. You know, this is where indigenous people belong. And I felt very much at home, just like I was in Africa, you know. So I think I'll stop there, looking at the time.
I love it. And as Nainoa keeps saying, the commonalities. Yeah. Karenna, over to you.
Okay, I'll be brief. And thank you so much. Kind words and wise words from everybody here, from Nainoa and Lucy and Mary Evelyn. And I want to just express my gratitude for that. I think, how did we lose this connection? Well, there are many different mythologies in cosmologies in different cultures that describe when people fall away from the truth, when people fall away from who they really are. And in the Hebrew Bible, the prophets really speak to this. And if you can think of their words as symbolic, I think that they're very instructive to what's happened to us today. The golden calf, the idolatry, looking at things. Why would you have the golden calf when you could have Creator, God, the divine? I think that's where we are right now. And we will continue to experience the pain and suffering that comes with the small-mindedness and misguidedness of applying a sense of sacred, because it is a kind of form of worship sometimes, the way people talk about this economic growth, no matter how unequal it is, no matter how much pollution and depletion. So I think that we need to really look for that guidance. And then I would just, as I know we have a brief amount of time, say that you know, there's a teaching that Robin Wall Kimmerer lifts up a lot of reciprocity, and she talked about it in The Honorable Harvest. And reciprocity is indigenous wisdom. There is also a way of thinking about it in some other world religions. And I would lift this concept of right relationship. You know, there was a Quaker centuries ago, John Woolman, who talked about right relationship. And that, I think, is to others, to nature, and to the divine. And that right relationship, that sense of it, led him to be an abolitionist, to be leading against slavery in this country. And that, I believe, is where we need to understand that divine power and truth in that sense of right relationship, reciprocity, is what can guide us towards the reconnection that we need to nature. So thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you, Karenna. And last word with Nainoa.
Okay. Again, thank you folks for everything. It's been a wonderful morning. Yeah, we're, I guess, getting back to the question. I find ourselves in the modern world as disconnecting from the relationship to nature. You know, the worldview of the islander is that mankind is actually a fourth priority. Akua, the cosmos, comes first. Water is second. And then all life in nature is third. And man is transient. And opposed to the belief that man is first, and nature is a commodity that it will use, and that is complete conflict of what we're uncovering, and we are where we were because we taught us to be here. The 250 years of industrialization, we trained for that. The public school in the United States was actually engineered in the early years to build the workforce, to industrialize and make the country the most powerful economic power in the world. Well, we did that. But we didn't pay attention to culture or ecology or climate. And we're finding out now, and I will just end with, my real strong belief is in young people, the movement today, where nature is first. You have to change schools. And I think it's the biggest long-term indicator is what we teach our children. And so this is why, I'll end real quick right here, that's why planetary health is so important. It has the code that needs to be cracked to bring people together around the world, diversity. But what's so beautiful and of today is I got to meet, Karenna, and I got to meet Lucy, and I got to meet Mary, and finding that you're not by yourself. You're in the fight with many, many people that are trying to do the right thing. And I think it really is the movement. Planetary health is a movement for good, for the earth. And so Lucy, Karenna, thank you for meeting you today. It's just been so wonderful. And I hope this is just the beginning. You guys take good care.
Thank you so much. And our time is over, and Sam is here. But thank each one of you for your wonderful remarks. Many thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for such an incredibly rich conversation. Thank you, Mario, Evelyn, for a beautiful job moderating. We're going to close now, and we'll be reconvening in about 10 minutes for the final plenary session of the day. So thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank
Aloha.
you, Harold.
Aloha.